Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Derek Lidow, where he tells us the 3 types of relationships, as well as dives deeper into the 5 skills of startup leaders. Keep it right here. Part 2 is coming up next.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performers Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. You know, I had not planned to go down this rabbit hole, but you know, this is really good stuff. We got to continue down on each one of these 5, and then we're going to jump into your new book. But what about the second one? Where's some of the mistakes you see and some of the pitfalls on number 2?
Oh, well, relationship building is really an interesting one because ultimately there are only 3 types of relationships in the entire universe, only 3, and they fall into these buckets: competitive, cooperative, or retreating. Now, in the West, we think that when you're in a group, that it's always good to cooperate, it's bad to be competitive, and it's wimpy to retreat. But this is not the case. Ultimately, if you want to form a very potent relationship with another person, you want that relationship to be a combination of all 3 types. You want to cooperate on certain things, and you want to compete on other things, and you want to let the other person or yourself retreat in yet other areas. And without that balance of cooperative, competing, and retreating shared objectives in a relationship, things turn to the lowest common denominator and ultimately produce mediocrity.
You know, as you're saying this whole thing, I'm seeing the similarities between this as a business leader and then in personal relationships as well.
This relationships work in all.
Right, but being self-aware as well, right? I
Yeah.
mean, how important is that? I think I got your new book. It's Startup Relationships 101. Just take the same content.
Yep, and you know that people do not understand when's the right time to cooperate, why it's important to have some competition in a relationship, and why it's essential for you to retreat, or the people that you are working with to retreat, because otherwise they can't recharge, they can't express their creativity, they can't express their individuality if they never get a chance to step away from the intensity of the creation dimension of the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting because I tend to form very deep relationships with people, and that is totally my style. I mean, if you're trying to go somewhere, I am like a bull in a china shop. I mean, I will run right through you. I'll drag you to the finish line. I tell my clients that all the time. I said, you're going to give up before I give up. I may drag your bloody carcass across the finish line, but we're going to get to the finish line. And at other times, it's like, I'll mend your wounds. But it's like very multidimensional. Fascinating. I really like that. All right, 3. I'm taking notes here.
Okay, 3 is about motivating others. So relationship building is something that you do one-on-one, and it takes an enormous amount of energy to cooperate, compete, and retreat. And when you're dealing with large groups of people, you need to motivate them all at the, not on a one-on-one basis, but as a group. And to do that, you need to give them a shared sense of purpose. Now, this ultimately, if you're in a startup, should be what the startup is about. Hey, you're helping people, make friends, or you're helping people be more productive in their lives, or, some purpose. Without this purpose, people feel alienated, and ultimately they will wander away from you and your company. But that's not all. You also have to ultimately show them that you're interested in making them successful in doing their jobs, at developing a mastery at what you're asking them to do. And you have to show them that you're going to help them be successful. So that's very motivating. And the third thing is that ultimately you have to let them, this group, feel that they have autonomy in being able to make decisions on what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. And without autonomy, and without the feeling that they'll be able to master their own jobs and skills, and without a feeling of purpose, you cannot get a large group of people to ultimately dedicate their lives to seeing you achieve your vision. So motivating others is about autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
All right, you got to keep leading us through. Number 4.
Okay, leading change. So people hate to change.
That's true.
It's risky, it takes energy, and yet, particularly in the startup world, right, your business is changing weekly or monthly, and what you were doing last week is no longer good enough or big enough for what you need to do next week. So you have to get people to not only feel comfortable with change, but feel and becomes very confident that they'll be successful in the change. And to do that, there are basically 5 prerequisites that people are looking for and sensing on whether or not a change is going to take place. And these have to do with whether or not the leadership is aligned on what the change is. How many times does somebody come in and say, okay, well, I have a better software program,
Right.
But then somebody else comes in and says, oh, this is really, pretty, marginal, and, we're only going to do part of it. So anytime there's a misalignment among those that are responsible for implementing the change, everybody just seizes up. And ultimately, you're done for it. So you got to have this alignment. And the people that are responsible for the change, they have to be motivated to do this. So in the semiconductor industry, I always dealt with these highly successful and intelligent engineers and scientists. And when I would have this project, hey, we need to reduce the costs on something, the motivations for these scientists were, hey, does this mean that I get to work on a new piece of very expensive equipment? Because that's what they wanted to do to advance their knowledge. But my motivation wasn't to spend a lot of money on a new piece of equipment. My motivation was to, reduce the cost and eliminate maybe, expensive pieces of equipment. Right. And so you can't get around having to motivate everybody that's responsible for the change to actually want to make the change that you're, all aligned on. And that can involve some horse trading. That can involve some, changes in the team or changes in the mission. But without that alignment, you'll have people that right in the middle of the project will stand up and say, "I never agreed to do it this way." and when a key person says that, the project comes to a standstill, and maybe even collapses. So you got to align the motivation, and then you got to have the right skill sets available, and you have to have the right resources. And this resource is a tricky thing, because big companies, and this can happen in startups, play a game that I call the resource shell game, where now you see it, now you don't. Where, hey, yeah, I'll let you have, the 6 people from the IT team to help you, implement this new software. Just tell me when you need them and I'll make them available. And then, a month later, hey, it's time, I need those 6 people. And then you hear, oh, I can't give them to you right now. Oh, they're busy. Oops, you're just going to have to do it without them.
Right.
And something like that can collapse a project, and certainly you'll lose all your momentum. So these resources have to be made available upfront in a definitive way. And then the fifth prerequisite, which also always gets forgotten, or very often gets forgotten, is that everybody that's going to be asked to change has to understand why the change is important. Now, this requires a two-way communication, not a broadcast, a one-way communication. It requires a two-way communication with the people about, hey, this is why this change is going to be important for you personally, and that's why, we hope you'll be committed to making it happen rather than questioning it.
What's in it? What's in it for them?
What's in it for them? Exactly.
Interesting.
And without everybody understanding it, you're going to get these what are known as onboard terrorists that will make the change look bad. See, I told you.
Yeah,
it's working.
Yeah, I talk a lot about. I call it "Who's in your boat." And if you picture a rowboat, right, you're going to make some change. So you're in the rowboat, and you've got a couple of rowers, right? And then you got somebody in the boat that looks like they're just standing around. That's really literally what they're doing. They're not helping. They're just standing there. And that's actually not the bad guy. The bad guy is the one that's sitting there. He's got an oar in his hands, right? And he's just kind of going through the motion. He's not pulling. He's not doing anything. It looks like he's working, but he's not.
Yeah.
And then the worst one is you don't even see him. There's a rope off the back of a rowboat, and at the bottom of the ocean, there's an anchor, and then there's a guy down there or a girl down there holding onto the anchor, pulling back on the boat. You don't even see them because so often you think everybody's on board. You think, some people may not be totally on board, but they're not being obstructionist. But you find that people will work behind the scenes and try to do everything to sabotage it.
Yeah. And leaders often fall into this trap of broadcasting rather than communicating.
Yes.
So they send out a memo or an email, saying, this is what I want, this is what we need to do, here's when we're going to do it. And they send it out and they think, hey, now everybody understands what they need to do and everybody's on board. Well, that's one way, that's a broadcast. What you want is a real communication. So you need the feedback to come back on whether or not people understood the email or have questions about it or whether or not they're actually committed or worried about it.
Yeah. And you need to be self-aware.
And oh boy, without self-awareness, you never know when you need help.
I know. I love how that's number one. I love it. First of all, I can already see where this discussion's going. This is going to be about 5 hours long. This is going to get divided up into about 60 different episodes. So we've got to dive into your new book. But I'm telling you, I may need you back on next week because I've got about 20 other questions on a whole bunch of different topics through your bio that I know we're never going to get to. So we'll keep moving. But I'm pre-framing it that I'm going to need you back because this is great stuff.
Okay, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. What I really like about your background and what you put out there is that you really come off as a researcher. I mean, at your core, I'm going to give you a label. You're a researcher that has written books. You're not coming up with theory. You're researching things. You're finding out what people have done, what has worked. And I love that about your background. And I don't know if we're going to have time to dive into the Princeton University, the teaching that you do there. But if we don't, you're definitely coming back on the show. And I want to dive into students in 2018. How is that changing? How is it affecting entrepreneurship? But right now, I want to dive into your new book, Building on Bedrock, what Sam Walton, Walt Disney, and other great self-made entrepreneurs can teach us about building valuable companies. Man, you got my attention. I'm listening. What did you learn?
Well, that's the conversation that's taking place about entrepreneurship in today's society, what's in magazines and on many other podcasts, not yours. It is wrong and is ultimately harming entrepreneurship in our country and in a very insidious way. So this focus on entrepreneurship being about creating incredibly valuable companies in very short periods of time is scaring away people from actually wanting to be entrepreneurs. So the number of companies, new companies being started in the United States is at almost an all-time low. We think that entrepreneurship is exploding all around us when the facts are the opposite. That we're scaring away people from being motivated to deliver wonderful skills and ideas to other people and to society, because they think that unless you're a coding savant that's also an insomniac, that you have no chance of succeeding in this supposed winner-take-all, shoot for the moon, use millions and billions of other people's dollars to succeed atmosphere. So we're off course here. And I felt compelled to write a book that was based upon real facts and real live entrepreneurs that can act as role models that would be fun to read about, but would illustrate what's really true about entrepreneurship in our country and in the developed world, and inspire more people to try being entrepreneurs, because ultimately many people have exactly what it takes.
I'm shocked at the facts that there's less businesses being created today. I would have bet totally on the opposite side of that.
Exactly. So today we're creating about 600,000 new companies a year in the United States, and that's down from over 800,000 companies a year just 15 years ago, and has been in steady decline. And so we're scaring away people from thinking that they can be entrepreneurs when the reality is that they can.
And during your research, what were some of the other things that you came up with that were surprising?
Well, people have lost sight of what entrepreneurship really is about. We've tended to complicate it. So the whole industry of entrepreneurship gurus has developed, and to differentiate one from another, there's a lot of technical talk that's people imply are a requirement that you need to understand viscerally about how to do customer segmentation or construct the perfect value proposition. And we've lost sight that entrepreneurship at its core is just about making some group of people happy enough that they'll gladly give you money in return. That's it. That's the fundamental principle of entrepreneurship. And you don't need to make it more complicated than that. And the question is, how do you make people happy? If you're good at making other people happy, then you're probably have what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. And no, you don't need to write 50-page business plans and discuss which type of computer API you're going to use to call on your functions effectively in the database that you need to construct. That's not going to make ultimately enough difference in whether or not you're going to be successful. It's whether or not you make people happy.
Everybody's interested in success. However, only a few are really committed to it. What's the difference? Those that are committed are willing to do whatever it takes in order to get their outcome, in order to get their goals. If you're not getting the results you need and want, chances are it's accountability. Who's holding you accountable? I've got a challenge for you. For 1 month, 30 days, and $95, our team will hold you accountable for what you said you were going to get done in that month to get your goals, get your outcomes done. If at the end of 30 days you don't like the results or you just didn't like the system, we'll give you your money back. The question is, are you interested or are you committed?
Keep an eye out for part 3 of our interview with Derek, where he tells us the difference between high-risk and bedrock entrepreneurs, in addition to why entrepreneurship will always remain the same despite the shift in business types. See you next time on Peak Performers Podcast.